Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentle them, welcome into a guide series for Lost Ark for the Western release. I've been spending my time playing all of the 15 classes that are coming to the Western release for Lost Ark. So if you're excited about the release, I am too, and I've been kind of figuring out what class I want to play, how the classes play. So we're gonna do a video on each class. And the way I'm going to treat this video is very mindful of the fact that as we move into the Western release for the game, there's going to be shifts in how classes are played, the understanding and meta for that region, the players, of how they like to play the game. Plus, there's probably going to be significant changes to the game itself by region. So we don't necessarily already know what the meta is going to be, although I'm sure it's going to be very similar to Russia, Korea, and Japan as they exist right now. But I'm going to treat these videos as more of like an overview for the class itself. So if you're interested, we're going to start today with Artillerist. So Artillerist, we're going to go through the gameplay mechanics of it, the identity skills, the abilities, the engravings, how they play and where they fit in, and just go over kind of an overview synopsis of the class if you're looking for more information you want to know about it. But first, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Who knows? I might even be streaming right now. We're here in the training room, so we're just kind of going to go through each of the pieces. So starting with the weapon, all classes have their own basic weapon that are limited. This one has, it's an attack chain. So when you right click, you'll shoot and it speeds up little by little, and that's your attack. So in this game, some classes never use their basic attack ever because based on their gear or their playstyle or their abilities, they never have to. And some classes do. So, this may not be important to you depending on how Artillerist ends up getting played, but it's important to know kind of how that works. Looking at the abilities, the way Lost Ark works, and I'll have a separate guide for slotting your abilities, you have 8 ability slots on most classes. Artillerist has 8, and you can basically just take them and slot them in depending on what abilities you want. And then you can further modify those abilities by choosing through your skill point tree, selecting different modifiers, applying runes, and you can even get tripod bonuses on your gear that make them more expansive. That's all gonna come in the very end of the game, but this guide is more of an early game guide of like, do I like Artillerist? Do I wanna play it? So let's go through some of the abilities. The identity is a good one to start with. So this is your firepower gauge. The way this works is as you deal damage to enemies and build up your firepower, you'll see the meter here go up as I attack. When this gets full and I have fully filled up my meter, it'll activate my ability to go into garage mode, which is like a little turret. So you can deal damage, and while you're going after it, you drop all your abilities, you get damage going on, and eventually you'll fill it up and then you'll be able to transform. So now that we have full meter on the firepower gauge, you see this little light show up. And when I press it, for a limited time, I will go into barrage mode. Now, the downside with this is you can't move while you're in it, which at early levels and when you have low level of agility can feel kind of chunky because you get locked in. Most of the time, from what I experienced and what I've seen, players will just get into this mode, use their laser beam, and you can shield yourself while you're in it so you can take some damage, and then they'll cancel it and get out. So really, when their firepower gauge gets full, they transform, use their most damaging ability, and then they get out and go back to normal. So that's generally how people use it. It does change a little bit by encounter, whether you're going to be able to get into it or not, but it is pretty tanky. You'll be able to use your shield and get some defense up on that. A lot of the abilities for the Artillerists are pretty slow early on. So like I'm locked in place for the rocket launcher. When I use Napalm Strike, I'm locked in place as well. But keep in mind that as you get higher up in gear, especially if you're running full agility will increase the cooldown skills, the movement speed, and the attack speed, which does affect your abilities. So if you're running an agility build, and I think currently most Artillerists do, you'll end up getting pretty fast once you have end game gear. This is a tier 3 character, so I don't have end game gear right here. But if you end up getting to, like 1500 with high levels of agility, you can get pretty darn fast, so that kind of goes away. But these are the abilities you're going to have. You're going to see a lot of flamethrower coming out. A lot of people like using rocket launcher. You're going to get the most of your damage usually in the current meta from missile bombing, which this was right here. This is a very delayed attack. And this is probably the core of what most Artillerist gameplay comes down to. You have a lot of different channels and movements and AoEs, but a lot of your upfront damage comes from being able to land these delayed skill shots. You have this airstrike, which you can modify a lot as well. But if you drop that down, you can see it's a delay, and then it hits. And the same thing for the missile bombing. You put it down, and when this circle fills up, it hits. So a lot of playing Artillerist in endgame content, in PvP and PvE, is being able to correctly predict where your target will be in a few seconds and land that. So because of that, I would say Artillerist probably has the widest range of efficacy. It's very easy to, you know, drop one of your AoEs down over here, completely whiff it, and that's, you know, a big chunk of your damage that is now gone. And then you can drop into this. And then if I put my laser beam this way, you can see it's very slow to turn. So if the boss jumped behind me when I did this, my whole laser beam is just gone, right? So it's easy to completely whiff your abilities. And I'd say that it's probably one of the more difficult classes to play in hard content for that reason, because you tend to be a little bit less forgiving in your movement. A lot of you have channeled abilities and things that you can miss. But it's very satisfying when you land it, because when you get everything right, you can do some of the best damage in the game with huge bursts, which is super fun. For the identity, that's the turret mode, and then you have 2 awakening skills. You have missile saturation, which this is one here. It's just a big AoE channel. You stand still, you have armor that protects you, and then you can just drop a whole bunch of missiles there, which is pretty great. And then you can also use the second one, which is heavy turret. All classes get 2 awakening skills, and you can equip one based on what content you're in. The second one is a giant turret. To be honest, this one is situational, so this one lasts a while. Let's see how long it lasts for. I don't even know if it tells you. It lasts a good 20 seconds, but I'll just sit here and shoot. So obviously some encounters, you'll be able to use this to great effect, because you'll be able to place it down and it'll have like 20 seconds of uptime on the boss. In some encounters, the boss moves too much, or, you know, the encounter you're in, there's too much movement, so you won't be able to get efficacy out of it. And also in PvP, it can be challenging to use as well, just because, you know, the arenas are so large, people can just leave the area of the turret. We'll see which one gets used more when it releases. But those are your 2 options for awakening. I think most people use the missile saturation because it's a little bit more straightforward to hit. You can just drop it on the enemy, and there you go. And I believe you do have, does it say what armor you have while doing it? Yeah, super armor, all immunity. So while you're standing still, you can't be interrupted, which is great. And then, yeah, and that's kind of where it is. There's a lot of depth with each class, which I want to try and stay away from, on whether or not what you use for each ability, right? So if we go to like missile bombing, I can make an atomic bomb, which makes it increases the damage, adds a bomb on it. I can make it deal more damage to knockback immune targets, which are bosses and elites. I can make it do more damage to normal. You know, there's a lot of ways you can modify these. The runes help speed them up and change them as well. But I think that goes into more of the meta, how the character is currently played, and I want to see how Western Europe and North America end up developing their own meta on what they like and what works well for them. You can take, like, for example, it actually can be pretty different. So this is the rocket barrage. If I end up changing this rocket barrage from unapproachable to laser blast, go ahead and save that. Like, save it there. Go ahead and save it. And yep. Now it's a laser. Right, so much more range, a little less inaccurate, but not as much spread, and they end up having different properties and damage types and things like that. Right, so there's a lot of different ways you can play through that, but that's basically Artillerist and how it's played. Very tanky. You end up using a normal shield. Usually most people will use energy shield, so you end up popping this up. It gives you a nice little absorption. They have a good amount of armor immunities relative to other classes because they're a little bit slower. Their dodge isn't the best, but it's not the worst either. And then obviously when you have turret mode, you end up having to stand still, and you have to kind of channel these. Although again, you do have a shield that goes into it. So slower, and the fact that you have to use more strategy in how you plan because you have delayed attacks. So it can be more of a thinking strategy class than some of more like the fast input reactive classes. But super fun. I might end up maining Artillerist for the launch. But I think this class is a great one if you like heavy artillery and you don't want the fast, spammy reactive inputs. You know, you're not a high APM kind of player. You like planning out your moves and being rewarded for outthinking your opponent and placing yourself properly in, you know, hard endgame content. So that's Artillerist. We're gonna move on. If you're looking for an overview of all the classes, I have a choosing your main class guy you can check out. But yes, let's move on to the next one. And the other thing to think about when you're deciding the class that you want is the class engravings. These are the general engravings that every class has access to. And based on how you equip your accessories, your ability stone, as well as your 2 engraving slots, you'll be able to build a setup of engravings that activate and give you special passives. However, every class has 2 engravings that are unique to them and only them. And generally, they're pretty build defining. Some classes will end up using both of them if they don't conflict with each other. I think most classes end up using one because in a lot of cases, they do conflict with each other. They just have very different play styles. But for the artillerist, your 2 options are bombardment, which is increase your turret mode damage. So when you transition into your identity and you lock yourself in place, you deal more damage, which at highest level is 40% more, which is a lot. And then if you don't have your firepower active, it helps you get your firepower back faster. And then when your firepower is full, the reload effect is reset, which means that you're able to get back into it faster. So it generally just helps you get into turret mode and then makes your turret mode stronger. And your second option is enhanced siege, as it's depicted here. It might have a different name when it is in the Western release. But this reduces your damage taken, which makes you tankier, which is great for artillerists because he's very stand still. Even with high agility, you still have moments where you're standing still and taking damage. So it's great to be tankier. And then you get higher crit chance, which since you have a lot of your damage built into single hits more than most classes, having higher crit chance just gives you great damage options because those big bombs that you drop can deal a lot more damage. So I think Artillerist is one of the few classes that uses both, but these are your options for unique engravings that only the Artillerist has access to. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.